Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
And per the usual, we're going to go through the old podcast real quick. And you can reach out to us at ittasteslikeburningcast and at gmail.com. That's for any of your questions, concerns, comments, interests, fascinations, and theoretically litigations. You can also find us on Twitter at ITLBcast. You can find us on YouTube now.
Yeah, we've got a YouTube. All the podcasts are feeding into the YouTube channel with a static image. There is some extra content on there if you want to see what we look like. That's where I'd go find that. If I was looking for that, and look for other stuff, we're going to do some little short videos.
Might even ultimately doing like the full live stream.
Yeah, there's some live streams in there in the future. So,
but it'll be a while.
Yeah,
because as much as we're set up for it, we're not.
Yeah,
so,
and we'd love to hit the old metrics on the YouTube for where we can have some commercials and whatnot on there, right?
Speaking of metrics, there's these things that you hear continuously, like remind and subscribe.
Yeah.
Guess what? We need you to do that.
Yeah, definitely do that. Hit the little bell on the YouTube, go on your podcast player, write a review.
That's a big one.
All those things help so much. And comment. I mean, on the YouTube deal, throw a comment in the comment section. We'll answer it. I mean, we're not big enough that we don't have time to answer comments. We'll interact with you on those comments. So
yeah, you give us something interesting, it can very easily be a
good topic.
Whole topic for another podcast. And the last part of that, if you're still around, is there's always Patreon. We're slowly but surely building that, and we have stickers.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that, that's another way to help support us. And the Patreon is It Tastes Like Burning. The one thing I want to add real quick on YouTube is that you can find us on YouTube at It Tastes Like Burning. But we have found that since we're such a small channel, that when you do that, you're actually going to pull up a whole bunch of Simpsons episodes with Ralph. And that's kind of where the It Tastes Like Burning comes from. And we recommend that you do It Tastes Like Burning and maybe search podcast with that also.
Yeah, that'll get you there.
That'll help you zero in on it. So today we have a guest. And our guest is Gary. Say hello, Gary.
How's it going today, guys?
Fantabulous.
Yeah. Any better, I couldn't stand it.
Right. I'd need an injection.
Yeah.
So, Gary, tell us just a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? How did you get here? Where'd you start in the fire service? All that good stuff.
Originally from Southeast Michigan. Started back in high school. I took EMT class. That got me around my local fire department. That's where I did a lot of my EMT clinicals and led into paramedic class. So then that led me to helping teach EMT and paramedic, and further led into fire academy.
Okay. Now, when you went from high school EMT class into fire academy, what did that transition kind of look like? Did you immediately do it? Did the program have a step for you? What did that look like? Is that something that you had to blaze a trail by yourself on?
So the class I was in was actually the first year they were doing the EMT class in high school. It was a legitimate EMT class taught by us that was brought in, contracted. So it was taught by a local EMS school. And then it was a few years before I went to fire academy, but that was a super easy transition, as that was just at the local community college that recognized the credits that I already had.
Okay. Now, when you did that, you went through the fire academy. I assume you already had your EMT.
Yep.
So what does that look like in the state of Michigan? What golden woodchuck certificate do you get there?
So your EMT and fire is actually totally separate in the state of Michigan. You get your national registry, and then the Department of Health handles the EMS licensing. And once you have your state EMS license, you don't even have to keep up your registry. You can just renew your state license.
That's the way Texas is. So.
Texas has the same thing.
And then through your fire side of things, you just go through your firefighter 1 and 2. You can either take it one at a time or go through a full academy. The academy I did was on through the community college. It was a 2-semester thing. I was working full-time as I did it. So it was Monday and Wednesday evenings, and then Saturday all day.
Okay. Now, in Michigan, did you have to maintain the EMS side to maintain your fire cert?
No.
Okay. But let's say, just pretend whatever city, and I'm sure every city had its own requirement, but at the end of the day, was it really typical to expect the firefighter to maintain both certifications and license?
100%.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know I truly don't know how other states work. I mean, all I know is Texas. So in Texas, they're together, but they all have different CEs. So you have to maintain the CEs for your national registry or the Texas license, and then you have your fire CEs also. Now, you are not in Michigan anymore.
No, I am not.
You somehow or another stumbled down the path and you ended up down south. What enticed you to go from the great north to the deep south?
It was right around time during COVID. Michigan kind of seemed to be falling into an abyss that didn't seem like it might not come back as fast. And I had family moving down here, and as I helped them move, I was offered a job down here.
Okay. And then when you were in Michigan, were you on a career department? Were you volunteer? Were you trying to make the transition? What was going on there?
So when I was up there, I was doing a part-time gig at the local dragway. And then I was super involved in the local career departments, but I wasn't actually on a career department.
Now, what do you mean by you were involved with the department?
So I would go up there a lot and hang out with the guys. I did a lot of my training with them. I kind of slacked off during my paramedic, and so I got to live with those guys for a month straight.
Okay. And then when you finally decided to make the move to Texas, I guess the first question I'll ask is, what made you kind of land in this area?
Really, it was, so I work about 45 minutes from where we're at, and then we just kind of went on realtor.com and found a realtor and said, hey, we're looking for a house to rent, and he brought us down here and showed us the houses around here, and we're like, yep, we like that one.
Okay.
Kind of just happenstance.
Okay. So with you moving into the area, when did you realize that we had a volunteer department, and what made you want to join?
I think I really realized it the winter of 2020 when we got our first big freeze when I was down here. I had come up to Station 1, and I believe I had actually spoken to, I don't remember who it was now, about if anything was needed or if there's anything I could do to help. I had a four-wheel drive truck and grew up driving in inclement weather and knew that I could, if anything was needed, I could help.
Okay. And out of curiosity, what was the response?
Yeah, and they handed me an application.
Excellent. That's the correct answer.
Yeah.
So now that you've been, obviously you joined, how long have you been on the department?
Just about a year and a half now.
Okay. Now, to kind of beat off into the weeds here and see how far we can bushwhack, what is the difference? And again, we're kind of comparing apples to elephants here, but what's the difference between, let's say, Texas firefighting and Michigan at just kind of face value?
I mean, I'd say the biggest difference is the medical response.
Okay.
So in Michigan, particularly where I'm from, Southeast Michigan, all the career departments handle the EMS side of things, and you have a hospital within 5 minutes in any direction.
Right.
So the local departments all have their own ambulances that they staff, and so they require paramedic, and you go ahead and take your you take and actually transport patients yourself through the fire department.
Okay. And then what about specifically on the fire side? What is there any, I mean, are they the exact same or is there a contrasting difference? And again, I realize we're comparing now a volunteer organization to a career organization.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, there's going to be at least some differences.
The ideas are still the same. Obviously, preserve life and property. But I think the biggest difference would be just everything's so close there that you can actually get to a house in an expedient amount of time and be able to preserve that property possibly. If not, then you're protecting the properties next to it, to where down here everything's a little more spread out. You might have an extended drive time to that scene. By the time you get there, you're just really mopping up.
Right. Well, it's the classic urban versus rural argument.
100%.
And the issue is that, and this isn't a career or volunteer thing, the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter how star-spangled awesome your physical en route time is. If you have a 45-minute drive,
stuff happens during that time.
Yeah.
It's not a pause button.
Undisputably.
Right? Yeah, it's not a pause button.
There's really not much that organization can do.
Nope.
And I think that's a problem, particularly on the volunteer side, is that they get just baby seal clubbed over this. And the fact of the matter is that a small rural area isn't going to have a career department because the tax base isn't there. And then on top of that, it's a rural area.
Yeah, well, if the population density is like 1 per square mile,
right?
How does 1 per square mile, but the nearest fire station is 30 miles away? How do you compare these things? Because I'm from the world where I've driven 40 minutes to be first on scene. Like that's a thing. I know what that's like, and to drive somewhere for 30, 40 minutes and be the first one there. A lot of things happened in that time, but there's not enough. That was the only call in that particular area in the last 7 years.
Right.
So how do you justify something being closer to that?
Right. Other than the medical side of it.
Well, even the medical side of it. I mean, if you drive through a gate, and let's just put it in perspective. If you drive 12 miles down the highway, which that 12 miles down the highway from the station didn't really take you but maybe 10 minutes, right? Yeah. That 12 miles may have taken you 10 minutes to get there, but then you turn through a gate and you drive another 17 miles to the house. Well, that 17 miles on that ranch through that gate took you 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, or 40 minutes.
You're not on a paved road.
Yeah, and it's unimproved roadway or whatever. I mean, you're not. Your top speed's going to be 20 miles an hour, and that's pushing it.
And to put into perspective where I'm from, the little town I don't know if I would call it a little town, is 20 and a half square miles with a population density of 4,200 people per square mile. And we had 4 stations.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now Texas, this is pretty unique in Texas because it's a big state. And the further west you go, you get into counties that are bigger than U.S. states.
Well, yeah. I mean, the county I'm from was bigger. Granted, it was bigger than Rhode Island, so it's bigger than the smallest state. But the county that I'm from was literally bigger than the state of Rhode Island, and there was one primary agency for medical and really one agency that was primary for fire that whole area.
One thing I'll add to that, and I just saw this the other day, the city of Houston in area is bigger than the state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's just kind of put this into reality. And we have counties that are bigger than Houston in Texas.
Well, yeah, you get out into Hudspeth or some of those.
Yeah,
Brewster.
Brewster.
There are ranches bigger in Texas than some states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, particularly when you get into really deep West Texas, they stage tankers every 35 miles. And they will have a hour and a half drive to get to scene. So, yeah, these things are not created equal.
Right.
And trying to compare the good work that, I'm sure Brewster has a Brewster County Volunteer Fire Department. We can't really whack them over the head over response times because they had to drive across Maine to get there.
Right.
So, just kind of put that back into reality.
Yeah.
And then particularly talking about Brewster County, not only is it the largest county in the United States, it's also the county with the lowest population density.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the lower 48.
Yeah, you get into like Terralingua and all that stuff where it's literally hundreds of people, but the county is, I don't know how big that county is. It's probably 30,000 square miles.
I have no clue.
I mean,
it wouldn't surprise me if it's 100,000 square miles.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. I mean, it's probably not as big as Oklahoma.
No, it's not quite that big.
But it's big as a lot of places.
Gary's over here pulling up numbers. Looks like Brewster County is...
Looks like
6,200 square miles.
Okay. So it's 6 times the size of the county I'm from.
The state of Delaware is 500 square miles.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our counties...
Oh, wait, no, I'll take that back. It's over 3 times the size of the state of Delaware and more than 500 square miles bigger than Connecticut.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our county's the 3rd smallest county in the state, and we're 500 square miles.
Right.
Just to kind of help put that into perspective. It's completely different. And at the end of the day, like I originally said, you're comparing apples to elephants. There's nothing to compare there. The job might be the same, but at the end of the day, the tactics, strategies, response, tools, equipment, personnel, needs of the community, they're all different.
Yeah,
They're
100%.
across the board, they're different.
Yeah.
And that kind of, I don't want to say the conversation needs to go this way, but that's why I don't like armchair quarterbacking stuff, because what the hell do I know about a rural fire department response in Montana,
Right.
or an inner city fire attack in Boston? I don't. And I just don't like armchair quarterbacking stuff. There's nothing wrong with having the discussion, but trying to say this is what they should do, no.
It's a great training tactic, though, to be able to pull up YouTube and watch the videos of how these other departments respond.
Sure.
Sometimes you get ideas of ways that we could do stuff different here, or you can look at it and be like, well, maybe we would have done this a little differently if we were there.
Yeah, no, there's something to be learned from everywhere you go, even the guys in Marfa, right?
Sure.
That they know things and they know how to do things with limited people or
Resources.
limited resources over great distances that don't factor into what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, when you truly get out there in the absolute barrens of West Texas, I'm sorry, there's no such thing as mutual aid.
No, yeah, it's they'll come tomorrow.
Right. So if there is no thing as mutual aid, and they have highways, they have railroads, I assure you they have oil, so they have petrochemical, but mutual aid's not really a thing. That's going to completely change your strategy and tactics.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be top to bottom. Everything from the way you handle a car accident to the way that you handle the theoretical train derailment to, in their case, a mine collapse, or truthfully for them, their medical response.
Yeah.
That's going to be their primary burdens, their medical response.
And we saw it where we were, but you see some of those people that are way out, that they're a long way and they know they're a long way. Most of those people are calling 911 and trying to shove somebody in a vehicle and close the distance.
Right.
Yeah, those folks are, and the nicest way to say this, they're far more self-sufficient than the folks that live around here.
But again,
They have to be.
they have to be. I mean, and even to a certain well, not a certain extent, the corporations and companies out there the same way. I talked about staging water tankers every 35 miles. That's the oil companies. They personally donate not the tractor but the trailer, and they'll put a water tank every 35 miles. Because they have a need and an understanding that water's a limited resource out there, and that there needs to be some water staged across the way. Because I can assure you, when you start getting to a county that takes 2 hours to cross it, doing it 80 miles an hour, yeah, the department can't afford the tanker.
No. And even at that, it takes so long for it to get to where it's going. So we're still hard and heavy into our recruit academy, right? And Gary's been, this is, I guess, your second one or third one to kind of be a part of, and you're filling the role of instructor more and more every time.
Which you're good at, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So looking at kind of what we're doing as a whole versus what you did in Michigan, how would you compare the two of those things?
So the academy particularly that I had went through was an academy, as you would know, an academy. It was Saturday mornings. We started off with PT, and then we went into our hands-on training. Mondays and Wednesdays was classroom training. The way we have our rookie school here and our sort of say academy here, I think it's a lot more conducive to both the volunteer department, but also the different learning styles. It allows the students a lot more opportunity, I feel, to ask questions and help get clarification. All the students know that they can come to any of the fire stations and ask questions there, and they'll get answers they need. And it allows them more one-on-one time with instructors if needed.
Yeah. How many were in your academy up north?
I think we started with, about 50. And by the time we graduated, I think we were at 25 after the end of the second semester.
Yeah. But that's a long time, right? 2 semesters is
yeah
6 months.
Yeah. We started in August and graduated in May.
Yeah. So we're cramming all that into 10, 12 weeks, basically. So
Right.
looking at, and granted, you went through it already knowing stuff, so you already had that basis of knowledge, but looking at how fast and rapid we go through this stuff, do you think that you see that the students are actually picking up things and they're learning, or are we just going so fast that they can't keep up?
Oh, no, they're for sure learning. There's been plenty of students that I've personally seen and I know have come into this with no fire experience whatsoever and come out and I wouldn't be afraid to have them next to me going into a building.
Right. And I always tell people, like, we're not, our goal is to not teach to proficiency, right? We're teaching to don't die. That's kind of the standard I look at it as. Like, it's enough knowledge that you can be safe and be effective.
The only thing I would add to that is that we're teaching to a basic level of competency.
Right.
So that you have the ability to encounter, and I'm going to say a very generic scene, and realize that you have the ability to do a couple of different things. Not necessarily be the world expert on that exact scenario, but to reinforce what Jesse was saying, understand that you have been trained to this. Now don't die. And you can feel competent in not dying.
Or at least understand what's going on around you on scene.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I feel like there's this misconception that with any academy, that you go to this academy and now all of a sudden you're this expert and you know everything there is to know about it, and that's truly not the case. It doesn't matter what academy it is. You don't know everything there is to know about it. You've got that first piece of knowledge to build upon at that point.
Right.
And I see that misconception all the time that guys were like, well, I went to school for this. Well, yeah, but you went to school to learn how to read. Like you're not a author at this point, right?
Well,
Probably the best way I can really sum this up, in a career department, let's assume that you get hired. You get sent to their academy, and then your probationary period starts after you finished academy.
Right.
The academy gives you your training wheels. And I know that sounds almost insulting, but the fact of the matter is that if you tried to have an academy that produced battalion chief level of experience and decision making on scene, well, congratulations, it takes 30 years to graduate.
Right.
it takes that experience.
Yeah. The literal intent of any academy is just to get you to be on scene, to be competent and proficient in whatever skills that they require for the organization.
Well, and safe enough, right?
Ultimately,
that.
Period.
Right, yeah. Because you got to be safe enough that you're not going to be a danger to yourself or others.
Right.
And this applies to any small or big career department. Out of high school, I started testing with Detroit Fire, and the first thing they tell you is it doesn't matter what academy you've gone through already. We're going to put you through our academy too.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and boy, I'll tell you what, you talk about raise some eyebrows. We operate the same way. Now, the difference is the way that you ask that. Now, if they're brand new to the department and they have no fire background, well, basically this conversation goes, you will go through the academy.
And you will do everything. Participate 100%.
Our humble little volunteer fire department turns around to career firefighters that have retired. And they have come to us. And I mean, we're talking chiefs, assistant chiefs, battalion chiefs. And we tell them, you need to go through our academy. Okay. Now, the way you explain that to them is you need to see at what level our people are operating at. And it also gets you introduced to our level of basically procedures and tactics. So if you explain it to them and you smooth it over that way, then they don't have... The other thing you add is that I need you to help be an instructor.
That's exactly how it was presented to me when I came on, coming in with experience. And at first, I mean, coming in as an outsider, you're like, well, I already know all this stuff. But it when you step back and take a look at it, I mean, coming in and still going through the academy allowed me to be shoulder to shoulder with all the people who may or may not also have had experience, but also get to know everybody else on the department and work better with them on scenes.
And that's the kicker is that I would argue that for any department that's lucky enough on the volunteer side to have an academy, I'm not saying that career guy doesn't have a lot to offer to your organization, but you are begging for a bruising if you don't integrate what they know with what you teach, because these are not the same. You have got to be able to get that battalion chief to understand this is the level that we're operating at. It's not that we're teaching you anything. It's to get you integrated into our organization.
Yep.
Well, and it's the same as Army boot camp or anything like that, right?
Sure.
So you went through this thing together, and that starts that bond. That's what builds that bond initially for those members. Like, they all know that they went and did it. Some of them did it at the same time, and they went through it together as a group, and so those people build those bonds. And you've built bonds like that.
I have two of the guys from my fire academy standing up at my wedding next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's truly what it's about, right? It doesn't matter that I had 20 years in the fire service and came here. I still went through the academy. You know, I was lazy about it. I'll admit that. Like, I didn't do the coursework. I just took the test and rolled on. But I didn't have to do all that because that's the book, and I knew the book. Right, as a long-time instructor and all that part of it was second nature to me. I didn't have to spend that time. But and honestly, if you're coming into it with 20 or 30 years experience, you don't have to read the book.
It's pretty rare. It's been a while since it's happened. But if we have someone join that's a career guy, retired career guy, and they come into the organization and I give them the very gentrified version of why you need to do the academy. If they say no, I get rid of them because at the end of the day, they're not a team player, and I do not need a demigod going forth to telling our guys that this is how it's done.
It's an ego to get in the way.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's not about you. And if you're not willing to actually sit there and work with the team and figure out how the team operates, not interested. Yep. I don't need that person. I would much rather have, Mr. Johnny McNew, who doesn't know anything and has no skills, no knowledge, no practical application on scene at that given moment, 10 times over.
Well, and it like you said, it's a rare instance where that guy comes along that's just the ego's bigger than the person, right? Their ego's bigger than they are, and they're just like, that's beneath me, I'm not doing that. Well, they're missing the whole other side of that. Like, these guys aren't going to just bow down and worship you. Like, that's not what...
No, in our organization, close. Whether good, bad, or indifferent, that's kind of ingrained into our organization.
Well, as it should be, in my mind. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're an outsider still. You are the outsider.
You have to earn your place.
This is not your house at that point. You're asking to sleep on the couch at that point. And until you move from the couch to a bedroom, you've got to do what everybody else kind of does. Like, I'm not a huge fan of, well, I had to do it, you got to do it too.
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of that. Like, go out there and mop the sunshine off of the apron out in front of the station. I'm not that guy, but I do believe you have to make an effort to be part of the team. The team dynamic side of it, that's not just an automatic given. The knowledge and all that, yeah, that can be an automatic given, but the team piece of it is far from automatic.
Yeah, I mean, the other problem with this argument is that now at this point, I mean, we've had a 35-year battalion chief go through it, a 22-year chief, a 20-year assistant chief. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's like, are you better than them? Really? That's what you're claiming? Because you're not. I can assure you, you're not. And I've had that conversation before. The other thing, and this is truly just the definition of like an ass, but I've done that. It's been a long time. Probably, I don't even think you were here, Jesse. There was a guy, big department, joined. He was new. And the problem is that he had a pretty bad God complex. And he couldn't deploy a hose off of a truck. And it's like, dude, you need to come back to reality. Like you can't even do the fundamental basics. I could care less where you work as a career. I would argue you're a hazard there.
That's riding backwards one-on-one.
Right. And it was like, man, I don't know what to tell you, but not only do you need our academy, you literally need our academy to rebuild some of them fundamentals. And of course, that makes me ultra popular when you say that. But again, there's so much going on in that exact dynamic. Nah, it's better to just separate. You go continue to be awesome, and we'll continue to be volunteer. 10 times easier. 10 times easier to just separate at that point.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason that's so important, like in a scenario like that, is you don't know, especially being a volunteer, who's going to show up at the station for that call. you might get there as the truck's pulling out and find that you're riding backwards, even if you have all those years of experience. So it's important that you know how to deploy a hose line still,
Well,
because it might be you deploying it.
and the reality is that we're really not that accepting of laterals, right? It's not a lateral.
No.
It's not even close to a lateral, right? That lateral, if you come in, eat a little humble pie, do what you're supposed to do, acclimate to the team, it may be faster for you to move up the food chain and be something more than just that backwards riding firefighter. But that's purely up to that individual and their attitude.
Period.
Yeah, it has nothing to do necessarily with where they were or what they did or what their name is or any of that crap. It's 100% attitude based.
I'm going to use an analogy it's a terrible analogy, particularly for this discussion, but it's very applicable. So different types of airplanes require a different type rating to fly. So that would make sense that there's a difference between a Boeing 747 and an Airbus A380. At the end of the day, they have engines and wings, but shockingly, they're made by different companies, so they're going to be handled and operated differently. And the fact of the matter is you might be coming to us with a Boeing 747 type rating, okay? That does not mean that you're ready for our Airbus A320 airplane. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that you're not highly skilled, highly educated, and highly experienced, but it doesn't translate to this organization. And you have to have a fundamental basis of education and understanding to be able to operate here. And like I said, that's a weird analogy, and I hope I explained it where it makes sense. But that's literally the case. The fact of the matter is that we're a volunteer department. We're a big department for volunteer, and we do a whole bunch of different type of stuff on scenes.
And we are a very organized volunteer department.
Yeah, it's just different. And there's nothing wrong with pumping the brakes a little bit and trying to figure out exactly how the organization operates at a fundamental level.
Well, and there's a whole other side of that too, right? Yeah, we're a big volunteer department, and there's a bunch of people, right? But as a whole, most of these people, and at least when you get down to the station by station level, right? People at Station 1 understand the abilities and I hate to call it shortcomings, but the things that other people are not good at or don't like to do or are not proficient at, right? We understand what each other are doing and what level they're on, because some people, heights or whatever, right? There's a height fear. Well, you're not going to take the guy that's afraid of heights and tell him, all right, get up on the ladder and go.
Right, standing at the base of the ladder with a shotgun.
Right. So that whole learning people and playing them to their strengths is a huge part of it, because if you've got people with this group of people that end up on a scene, and you've got 20 people and 5 of them are real good at this, send those 5 to go do that. Don't send the 3 that suck at that to go do that and send the other 5 to go direct traffic. It doesn't make sense. Use people to their strengths, and the only way you know that stuff is to be involved and train together.
Right. Now, Gary, here's kind of an unusual question for you, and it'll feel like I'm putting you on the spot with this. Is there anything in our training program that you would like to see, for lack of better words, evolve into it, or change, or even, take away? What can we do to make training better?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about that when I get back to you.
No, that's fine. That's an acceptable answer, because that is That's a loaded question. And what we'll do is kind of let that roll around in the back of your mind, and we'll come back to it at the very end.
I'll think about that one.
And what we'll do is we'll kind of segue into, just for lack of a better word, station life and being a member here. What do you think about, how do I ask this? How accommodating are we as an organization to you as an individual and your ability to participate, whether it be high or low?
I'd say very accommodating.
Okay.
It's kind of like Jesse was saying, like playing to the strengths. I feel like that's something that gets done very well within our department.
Okay. Is there, again, you were a new guy once on our organization, okay? Is there anything that we need to do to help make, for lack of better words, that transition into the organization better?
Well, I believe a lot of the stuff that I would have thought coming into the organization was needed to be changed has been changed at this point. I know Jesse's gotten new member packets made out and put up digitally, and that was a big thing when I came on. Was like there wasn't a clear path of what needed to happen or when it was happening. But that new member packet helps a lot with that. I feel like it seems like the contact and people hanging out at stations happens a lot more now than when I first got on. And everyone's a lot more inviting into both stations.
Well, now I will say and this isn't a pro or con, this is just a fact. And we're seeing it right now. Real typical for our organization, and this is kind of like the classic sign of you are officially becoming a Texan. As the weather gets cooler and cooler here, what you're going to see is that I'm going to call it overall participation starts to drop, particularly in the fall. But here's the thing. School started back up. Kids are in sports. Football's back on TV. It's not 1 trillion degrees outside. So there's reasons to be outside with your friends or family.
Holiday season.
Holiday season's coming down the pike. And what you'll see, and this is common every year for us, is the later and later you get in the year, you start to see people, for lack of better words, just catch up on everything that they kind of missed out on because of the busy summer season. Real typical here. And you'll see that as it gets cooler and cooler here, God forbid the temperatures drop out of the 5,000 degree range, that all of a sudden the membership, it feels like it's drying up. Well, it's not. What's happening is that across the board, everyone's just getting caught up. That's real common here. And it feels like that, oh God, we're slipping into something terrible here. And it's not. I've seen it during the high. I've seen it during the lows. It's real common. As it cools off here, people's ultra aggressive activity tapers off.
Well, and there's kind of a lull in call volume at that time of year too, because you're getting out of that wildland season. You're not to that cold winter high structure fire season. Your travel is slowed down some because people are at home, school, work, and whatever. So there's a lull in call volume that goes along with it, and I think you see that people take that breath for that minute is basically what it amounts to.
And I think another thing, and maybe I put too much stock into this, but one thing I think about coming from a suburban area to where we are here is this is kind of somewhat of a destination town.
Right, yeah, it's definitely a tourist area.
Having the lake, there's people that have lake homes that they come to visit to in the summer. And that brings in that extra traffic, which also drives up the call volume.
Right.
And so as school wraps in and things wind down, the tourism winds down as well.
Right.
And so that also attributes to the lower call volume and the lower department participation.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of along the lines of what Gary's talking about here, just for kind of like a weather update for our area. We had a pretty hot summer, and it was pretty aggressive this year. This week, we've had it cooled off. We've had a bunch of rain. We've had 10 inches of rain in 3 days, and it hasn't flooded. That's how dry it was here. And you go to like where I'm from in Colorado, 10 inches of rain. Well, you might as well send in not only FEMA, but,
You're talking landslides.
right. They just can't handle that kind of weather. In this area, we had an exceptionally hot summer, and it was exceptionally dry. And I mean, those first 3-4 days, we had something like 8 inches of rain. And like I said, zero flooding. There was almost no runoff off of that because it was that dry. And yeah, this area, it's fall. We're finally getting rain. It's cooling off. Again, sports are in full effect. And people are kind of winding down. The other crazy thing is that when it gets cold here, and in Texas, that's basically anything below 50, our call volume plummets. And I mean absolutely plummets.
Until it gets to that.
Fire up the heater season.
Yeah, it gets real cold, right? It gets into those 30s and stuff like that, and then or heaven forbid it gets below freezing, and then it jacks up again. But it only stays high for the length of the cold spell.
Right.
And then it's back to that lull. You always have the increase in the like Christmas crap and all that stuff and the holiday stuff and we drag the propane turkey fryer into the living room to throw the frozen turkey into. That's just people being people.
Yeah, unfortunately. Gary, I think one of the most important things, and I try and present this, and I don't know how successful I am at presenting it, but I am open to criticism and critique. Is there anything for the organization that in general that you would, it's not change, but is there something that we should think about top to bottom across the board? Is there anything that you think that we ought to look at, consider, whatever, tweak, evaluate?
Any concerns I had as I came out of the department and got familiar with how things go, I've started to see them get addressed as we've gone along. A big one was like how to be able to do more within the department. Like I said before, you don't know who's going to show up to the station. So how do you get to be where you can be a driver and operate the engine? And it seems like we've started addressing that already.
Okay.
I know there's been talk about setting up our own driver ops and pump ops class. So that was a big one that I was curious about early on, and it wasn't necessarily a matter of me wanting to be like, oh, I want to drive the engine next. It was more like if I know I could be there and somebody else can't, what do I have to do to be able to drive it?
Right. And just to kind of bird dog down that particular platform, so we're in the process of buying 2 new apparatus. These 2 trucks combined cost just under $2 million. So from my perspective as chief, I have to juggle 2 things. One, it's actually a lot more than 2. It's about 14 things. But the first one is the physical cost to the apparatus. Okay. The second thing is, I need you to go to calls. 3, your relationship or ratio's the better word between happiness and response correlate. Okay. But the problem is, and this isn't directly specific to you, but this is just the new member in general. If you don't have any fireground experience, I don't care what brand new class you took. I'm not going to turn you loose in the $2.5 million ladder truck. I'm sorry that makes you sad. We can figure out a compromise somewhere in here. And again, that is not specifically addressed to you.
Oh, no.
That is in general, because this is the great debate. When you come to a new person on the department, personnel response and the apparatus. And the only thing that I would ask to anyone that's listening, please at least consider the chief's perspective on this. In the event something happens to the truck, do you have the ability to actually replace it?
Well, and on top of that, another perspective that often gets overlooked, and I think about this as somebody who stands back and kind of look at the big picture, is a truck weighs how much? 60,000 pounds?
Well, like our mid-mount Pyrrhus platform, it's 86,000 pounds.
That's an 86,000 pound battering ram going down the road running lights and sirens.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an inexperienced person behind the wheel of that can do a lot more damage than just a truck.
Right.
Well, and that goes right into what Matt's saying, right? So it takes some of these things just take experience.
Right.
Training is good and training is awesome, and I'm the training guy and I believe 100% in it, but some of these things just take experience. And it's no different than life in general, right? It's a group of experiences that lead you into being who you are and have the abilities you have. And if you go from day one of I don't know anything to day 14 and I'm going to literally pilot the 86,000 pound truck down the highway, which our highway is horrible, that doesn't work. That's a recipe for bad things to happen. And it's more for the protection of the individuals as much as the department, right? It's to protect them from starting out in their path with us, their career, and literally ruining it in the first 6 months because they were way over their head and couldn't realize it.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound real cheeky when I say it. As a chief of an organization, to say that you are theoretically exposing yourself it's kind of an understatement. Okay? We have some pretty extensive SOPs and SOGs. You, as members, have access to that. That's my insurance policy. And if you make a really bad decision, I'm sorry. That's my insurance policy. And, let's just go to the extremely absurd. Let's say that you have a 17-year-old kid that takes your ladder truck and they respond code to a lift assist and they just take the truck and they have an accident. To say that I'm going to throw them under the bus is the biggest understatement of the century. There's a reason, though, that those policies and procedures and guidelines exist. There's a reason that training exists. And it's not just for the insurance perspective. It's the competency perspective. And I think that gets lost in translation sometimes when and it's not really our department, but I talk to other new or young members of a department and they don't really understand why the chief has X, Y, and Z policy, rule, procedure in the place. And I just sit there and just kind of laugh to myself, and it's like, oh, you're so naive.
Yes.
You have no clue what you're talking about, but you have a very vocal opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of, and I think this might be something more so with the younger generation, my generation and younger, is a lot a lot of it people don't realize is you get it when you put out. So yes, you're given the training, but are you seeking more?
Right.
Are you going up to the station on off days or when you have nothing to do and learning those trucks? If you don't know what's on your truck and where it's at, well then, and you're the one driving, then what kind of responsibility is that? So if you're not going to put in the extra effort, you're not going to get the extra responsibility.
The point that you just made is kind of like the light bulb moment that a lot of people don't really understand. If you don't think that your chief doesn't know that, you are so wrong. And we're not talking about how awesome or how terrible they are. I assure you, that's it's like the sixth sense of a chief. They know the people that put the time, energy, and effort into the organization. The one thing that I'll add to that is that if you are that person putting the time, energy, and effort into the organization, don't expect a gold ribbon. Don't expect a participation trophy. You just need to know that it's acknowledged. And from there, you're going to be able to actually advance pretty quick. You'd be surprised at how big of a difference it makes your level of participation.
Well, I'd like to add, don't even expect the acknowledgement.
Right.
Don't expect anything except for to make yourself better. Although the chief might recognize it, he or she may not be the only one who recognizes it. Other firefighters on scene, when you're told, go grab this tool, we need this tool, and they look over and you're kind of doing that shit slam, oh shit, not that door, and slamming it and going to the next one, it's seen how much you know your equipment at that point.
Right.
You're taking my coined phrase, the old shit slam. I think I used that one this morning.
Well, if you used it this morning, I might have heard it from you at some point in time.
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, unless Jesse, you have anywhere else to go?
No, I think we've done a good job covering some stuff and all for it.
Before we wrap this up, the one thing I'll add is this little discussion, and it is, I see a lot of organizations not considering this discussion. Your newest members have valuable insight to your organization. And whether they say positive or negative things, you need to listen. Some of it you may be able to integrate, some of it you can't. The stuff you can't, you need to explain why. But this conversation needs to happen. Okay? And it's not personal. It's just business.
Well, and it goes back to even like the new member packet that he was talking about, right? And that became a thing because of a conversation with new members that are just literally chasing their tail and asking 300 questions, and a group of them asking the same question over and over and individually, and it's
Right.
like, the light bulb goes off, and the suggestion was made by a new member, if there was a resource for this, it would be way easier on you. And I'm like, yes, it would. Let me spend the time, instead of answering all these questions constantly,
And repeatedly.
And put that time into making this resource, and then let it go do the work for me.
Right. And it's just, this is one of those things that's ultimately the health of the organization. Because I'm telling you, the second that you catch yourself as chief burying your head in the sand and you're not actually asking your new membership, what can we do to make this better? I would tell you to ask yourself, why is their opinion not matter? You need to really ask that question, because the answer to that question is how you progress. It always goes back to what Jesse says. Our sole responsibility is to
refine, train, and create our replacements.
Period. I mean, that statement is so powerful. I would almost argue that that's a mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
It really should be. And if you catch yourself where you are putting up barriers and you're intentionally holding people down, all I can ask is why. You may have a justification for it, and you may even be correct in that one instance. But what about that guy? What about that woman?
Well, I'll expand off what you just said. There is nothing wrong with telling an individual, "Hey, pump the brakes.
Right. No.
Slow down. You'll get there." But you're skipping steps, right? There's all, you went to step C and now you're wanting to go to step M. There's a lot of stuff in between there, and you've got to catch all those steps. That is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. But to say, "I'm going to hold you on step C for the next 6 months before you can go to D," that is not an acceptable thing to do.
Right. You should put forth the criteria, the policy, the procedure at how to physically advance. Leave it up to the individual. These are the steps to advance. Once they've completed, acknowledge their work and reward them by allowing them to advance. But to sit there and treat it like it's some sort of prison, for lack of better words, man, you are cutting your own throat the second you do that. When you go forth and put forward that they have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and they did it, and you haven't followed through with it, ooh, bad, bad, bad. Mm-hmm. You can't do that.
And you can't put forth all those and not expect somebody to complete them.
Right.
Because somebody will come up and step up toe to toe and challenge and get all of them done.
Yeah,
and the prime example is that is where we are right now, right? Right. We put out these criteria of all these things that you got to do, and it's not that we put out this insurmountable mountain of crap, but we just took the things that we always talked about or always knew that had to be done. We put it on paper and we put it in order, and we said, "Here's what you have to do to get to this level. Now, go do it." And the reality is most of them just dive in and get it done. And they're getting it done faster than what we expected them to get it done.
Right. Well, because it's a carrot on a stick. Good, bad, or indifferent. And what we're kind of beating around is the classic young man driving a truck. Okay? So the example on this is that you have that classic 20, 21-year-old kid. Okay? And I'll be more specific because we have one specific individual who is Texas Commission of Fire Protection certified. And for good, bad, or indifferent, we kept moving the yardstick further and further forward. The problem is that they met all of them. So they had EVOC, they had pump ops, they had the driver operator, they've done systems classes. Come back to reality. Why are Jesus? This person's jumping through every hoop you put forward. Sooner or later, if you keep telling them no, what are they going to do? They're going to leave. And you've just accidentally created the most competent and experienced and well-trained 21-year-old on the face of the earth. And you told them to go pound sand. You idiot.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Jesus, if they go through all of that, you have to turn them loose. Yeah. Now, does that mean you turn them loose on a nursing home fire? Probably not. That's not the one to cut your teeth on. Okay?
That's where the experience comes in.
Right.
They might have the knowledge, but they don't have the experience. Because if you're first due engine on scene, you're taking incident command right away. So they might be able to operate that engine, but are they going to be able to operate the scene?
Right.
And the engine.
Somehow. And the engine.
Yeah. So that's kind of that, we wear a couple of hats still sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Right. I mean, and the way I kind of handle this conversation in my organization is that you are 20, you're 21, you're 30. Do we really want the 75-year-old man on the nozzle? No. Okay.
you're going to be frustrated when you're the one pumping the third or fourth tank of water because the fire still isn't out.
Right.
And you're going to be wishing that you were the one on the nozzle saying, I could have done it faster.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, come back to reality. You have a whole bunch of people at the station, and you have a highly competent, trained engineer. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and go? We'll have the experience eventually arrive. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
And
So-
I think that's the most important thing for anybody to remember is if you have questions, ask them. The only stupid question is an unasked one.
Yeah, well, it is, and particularly in our organization, I still see this where people hesitate to ask questions. And it's like, I've never once,
Well, that may be my response, right? There are no stupid questions, only stupid people.
well, there is that, but they don't understand it. They don't understand that it makes you an idiot for not asking the question. And I just wish more people would actually wake up to the fact that that is why we're here, is for you to, that's literally why you have chiefs and assistant chiefs and captains and lieutenants, is for you to ask the question. Don't not ask the question.
Or don't think that you've observed enough
Right.
to know the answer, right?
Because it still falls back on the experience part.
Right. Yeah.
So, in all that experience of the people around you on the fire department, like, you might not be able to take the experience they have, but they can lend you some of that experience.
Right.
Like, they might not be able to tell you what to do in any exact situation, but they could tell you what they did in a similar situation, and that might be something that you take with you and carry with you into a future situation.
Yeah. And the thing to listen to more on that is, I don't know, but don't do this, right?
100%.
Because they learned, don't do that.
All right. Before we wrap this up, last question to Gary. Is there anything to improve in training?
Actually, I thought about this, and I think one of the things we could improve in training might be actually with the trainers, the instructors themselves. I think one thing I've noticed is like there might be on certain topics things that just seem questionable that other instructors have said or taught maybe a different way, and it might be something where like as instructors maybe we need to sit down and be like, well, what do you guys think? Like, why do you guys think it should be taught this way versus another way?
Okay.
Yeah, a little continuity in that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing.
Yeah.
I know there's been quite a few things where I've personally stepped in. I'm like, well, hold on. This is why you would do it this way instead. And it's kind of like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Well, and to kind of help put people into perspective on this. So I'll give you the classic example because this popped up in our most recent fire academy. We're talking about advancing a fire hose. Okay. And a technique that was showed was dropping down to one knee and trying to advance the hose while you're in what I'm going to call a prone position. No, prone's not the right word, but a kneeling position.
Yeah.
And you're trying to use your legs and your lower body to advance a hose line. Well, we don't do that. I've never seen someone on an active fire do that.
No.
We don't really train for that. Why are you showing someone how to do that? That's a very, very foreign concept. The one thing I'll add, and this will kind of sound terrible when I say it this way, but I kind of stopped him right there, and I'm like, you're exhausted. Why are you showing people how to advance a hose line that way? And I'll ask them in front of the students, how many times have you ever done that on scene? Well, never. Okay, turn to the students. Don't do that, ever. Because the person you're working with doesn't do that. And I'm not saying that advancing a hose line by staying low down on your knees and using your hips and your inner thigh to advance the hose isn't a very, very applicable way to do an interior attack. I'm not attacking that.
It's not a bad skill to have.
But what I am saying is don't show them a half-assed way to do it and then be exhausted and be like, well, you can try that. And you really haven't showed them anything.
Well, and it has to be something that's applicable to the area you're in. It goes back to that whole suburban versus rural argument. If it's not something we use, then it's not something that we might not need to be teaching them. Now, on the contrary, some of these people that we're teaching are trying to go career with it. But that's going to be something that experience is going to teach them.
Well, yeah, but so me and Jesse are both wanting to jump on this. I hope I don't steal your thunder, and I'm going to shut up to let you turn it loose.
No, go ahead.
Okay. There's a term that we both of us have kind of picked up from someone else. It's Gene. And the term's called dropping knowledge. When you drop knowledge, okay, in this area, in our county, in our region, every single department within 300 miles doesn't operate this way. Why the hell are you teaching anyone to do it this way? Because it's not remotely applicable to what anyone does on scene. Well, you're doing it to try and look cool, look educated, look experienced, but it's completely useless. Mm-hmm. And it's not that it's not a viable technique. It's just not applicable. It's stupid to show anyone that. Go ahead.
So I look at all these skills and even the advancing the hose with your butt cheeks or whatever you're talking about right here. These are all just tools in your toolbox, right?
Right.
So when you're building that starter tool set, right, and you go to Home Depot and you buy that first orange Home Depot toolbox, you probably put a hammer, a couple of screwdrivers, and a crescent wrench in it.
Right.
And that's your toolbox, right? So the academy is getting the toolbox and putting the kind of the starter tool set in it.
The basics.
The basics. Now, as time goes on and you do more training and you learn more things, that's when we're adding all these other tools into the toolbox. We don't need to fill that toolbox up at the beginning because that member can't carry the toolbox, right? They haven't made the basic things second nature at that point. So beyond those basic concepts and the basic way to do it, if we start piling all these advanced, and I call it advanced, but some of them are not that advanced, but we start throwing all these other techniques and other ways to do things in on top of that toolbox, all of a sudden finding the screwdriver in that toolbox becomes impossible because there's a 48-inch pipe wrench in there in the way. And that's what happens. Like that is not the place to do the advanced golden woodchuck hose handling drill. This is starting from square one. What is a hose? How do I make this hose go over there?
Yep.
And we've got to start with that before we can go Kung Fu Panda roll with the hose.
Right.
Through the front door and go ninja moves on it. Right?
And I think that's where I say the continuity of what we're training.
Yeah, I think, and guys learn cool stuff, and I know all kinds of cool stuff. I've been to schools all over. I know all kinds of cool tricks. And most of the time I just keep my little cool trick to myself until maybe the end, and I'm like, hey, y'all want to see something cool? Let's do this.
Yep. And
then maybe show it to them, maybe let them try it, but it's not, that's after the real knowledge is been given, because literally you'll make the toolbox too heavy to carry.
And they won't know how to use all the tools in it.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you got 7 Dremels. If you don't know how to grind the little thing, it's useless to have all those tools.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to sound like a callous ass when I say this. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I've been on a fire call or two, and I've done an interior attack or two. I'm short, I'm fat. I'm going to do it. Firefighting's hard. I'm going to do it as easily is physically possible for me. Because at the end of the day, you're on an air pack. Advancing a hose in this scenario by dropping down and using your lower body to pull the hose might work for you. I'm going to grab you by your shirt collar and pull you up to your feet and tell you no, because I can't do that. You are going to wear me out trying to advance the hose that way. We're going to advance the hose that's easiest for me, and we're going to then drop to a knee, and we're going to do the Lord's work. Okay? And it's not that you're not right, but I'm not wrong. And the fact of the matter is in this scenario, the limiting factor is probably me. And the fact of the matter is that we're a team, and we need to work together. This works. The fact of the matter is I'm going to be number 2 on the hose anyways. I'm going to advance the hose how I think's going to be easiest for me, not to accommodate some fancy tactic that you saw on Facebook. And I could care less what you think of that. And I know that sounds terrible when I say it that way. Now, if you have a partner and you guys have trained together and this works for you,
have at it.
Go forth and conquer. But I'm short and fat, and I have no interest in beating myself to death with your crazy technique, because it doesn't work for me. And I'm sorry, but that's the fact. At the end of the day, there needs to be a mutual of understanding at how to do this.
Yep.
And randomly trying to try this on scene, and they don't know what the hell's going on because you saw it at Training Academy for 3 seconds.
Or a Facebook video.
Right. That is not the time to try that out.
Yeah. It's same with medical or anything else, right? Step 1's not a tracheostomy.
Yeah. Thoracotomy.
Yeah. That's not step 1. So, you just got to remember that stuff. And I agree with the continuity. And part of that is just so much of training has been handled by so few for so long. And the goal of getting more people involved, I totally realize that there's going to be stuff that's all over the place as part of that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm kind of accepting of that in the sense that it's more than I can do on my own, so I just accept the fact that some of it's not going to be exactly how I would do it in an effort to make it grow.
I'm going to use a really weird example on this. So you take 2 different instructors, like me and Jesse. Jesse's done it for longer, and I might be very wrong in this next statement, but I've done it more. Okay? And we're at the end of the day, let's take something basic like ladder climbing. We're going to take that subject and teach it differently at the core value, but I'm willing to bet that at the end of the day, they're almost identical.
Yeah, the essence is the same, right? I'm the world's worst at teaching ladders, and the reason is I've spent the majority of my adult life on a ladder due to my career as electrician and air conditioning guy and all that stuff. So I've literally spent way too much time on a ladder, and I do things that no human should do with a ladder.
OSHA would have a problem.
They would have a cow, right? They're going to shit a gold meat axe. And it's just, that's why I'm not the best person to teach ladders. Do I understand it, and can I teach it, and can I keep it on point and tell you not to do all the things that you're probably going to see me do if you watch me use a ladder? Yeah, I can do that.
And that's kind of my point, is that at the end of the day, the core of our instruction
is the same.
It's going to be the same. And it's not going to be this fancy, I saw this once and it's really different.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you how to lock in and lean at like a 90-degree angle back and like back under the building. You're not going to see that from us.
Here's a good one. Give me that Pompier ladder, and I'm going to scale this 5-story building.
Right. That would be a fantastic one.
I'd pay to see that.
Yeah, I would too, but I can probably do it.
I wouldn't do it because I would die promptly, probably on the first flight to the floor. But yeah, I mean, and it's not, I mean, don't get me wrong. I really appreciate the help that we get in the academy. But the problem is that they're trying desperately to quantify their level, the reason they're an instructor by adding this extra twist. And I just sit there in the background and just kind of facepalm because it's like, no, come on. What were you taught to do here? Don't show them, if we had a Pompier ladder, this is how you do it. What? There's not one of those ladders in North America. Stop treating the attic ladder like it's one. And I know that's an absurd, extreme example, but the hose handling, don't show people how to advance a hose with your lower body while you're on the knees the whole time unless that's an established policy and tactic. Don't do that, because all you're going to do is screw it up.
Well, and let's face it, with the area we're in, most of the time you're starting out by dragging that hose through mud.
Right.
You are not advancing that hose line from the truck on your knees and making it to that house on one bottle of air.
And I'm going to throw this out here. If it's that bad and you need to advance the hose on your knees, you're going to figure it out.
Right.
Or you're going to get out. One or the other.
I was just about to add that.
You
You ain't going forward at that point.
Yeah.
You were trying to figure out how to get out.
So that goes back to one of these. I've got all these Jesse-isms, right? That I say all this stuff all the time. But one of my big things is like this concept that you need these super fancy hoods and this expensive, super awesome gear that's got all these extra stuff. And I firmly believe that if the differences between that middle of the road gear, and I'm not saying the bottom of the road, I'm saying that middle of the road gear, and that super expensive, fancy, extra special gear that's got like whatever features it's got, if the difference between that gear, the lower gear being good enough and this gear saving your life, it's because you were in the wrong spot, and the stuff between your ears should have told you to not be there, right? Back out. Learn where. That's what I'm more interested in you learning. I'm not interested in you learning that, my shoulder patch can go ahead and catch on fire and I'm still good for 5 more minutes. I'm interested in you learning, hey, this is the condition where I need to leave.
Right.
All those gauges on your dashboard don't mean anything if you don't know how to read them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, training is, that's what we're talking about here. Training is something that is a bottomless pit. And again, at the root cause of this, we addressed it at the beginning. It is to get you to a level to be safe and competent on scene. The fact of the matter is I don't need you to draw a Picasso. I need you to be able to look at it, acknowledge it, and then go forth and conquer.
And the reality is that I'm responsible for training people from no knowledge to being a firefighter to the tune of about, let's just call it 75 people a year.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go down that rabbit hole for 75 people a year of all these crazy, and they're not all crazy, all these super advanced techniques. I can't do that. That's not an achievable thing.
Well, at the end of the day, no career fire department does that.
Right.
They have their established procedures and policies and operations. And the fact of the matter is whether it be hose loads and whether you have a flat load, trifold, Minuteman, It doesn't matter. That's what you're doing. Whether you're vertical ventilation or horizontal ventilation, that is what you're doing. Whether it be water supply, tanker shuttle, swift water rescue, high angle rescue, cat out of a tree. There's a very, very specific order of operations that department's always going to follow in those events, because that's the standard that they train to, and that's the expectation. And the second that you pull the magic rabbit out of the hat and surprise everyone is the second that you're inviting disaster.
Yep.
That's just a fact. You can't do that. Now, if you want to train with it on the side and try and introduce it to the department, that's fine. But just magically doing it, surprise.
Yeah.
No, you cannot do that. You are begging for a disaster.
Not only for yourself, but for those around you.
Right.
Yeah.
And those you're unseen with.
And I would argue you're the one that'll be the disaster.
Yep.
Because it's so far out of standard procedure.
Well, and you need, when you're trying to do something like that, you need to know how to correct from it going wrong. If you only know how to do it because you watched that 3-minute Facebook video, well, they probably didn't show you what to do when it goes wrong.
Right. Jesse, do you have anything else?
No, I think we dove down that rabbit hole pretty hard.
Pretty deep. Gary, do you
Nope.
have anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, then I guess we're going to call that an evening. Real quick, I'm going to go through how you can find us. And you can always send your questions, concerns, comments to ittasteslikeburningcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at ITOBcast. You can always check out our new YouTube. Please remember to like, click, and subscribe there. And then on the Patreon, if you're feeling real froggy, you can always give us a little bit of support there. And really, if you have any questions, it adds a fantastic part of this. We do appreciate the questions that are sent in to us, and we haven't had any in a little while. So we'd appreciate it if you reached out. This is Matt.
This
This is Gary.
is Jesse.
Thanks, and have a good evening.